All right, so in this video, we're going to be going over the social science passage on the 7th SAT practice test. So what we're going to do is just start by reading this passage over here, and then we're going to conclude by answering all of these questions based on the passage, and then just talking about sort of strategy to choosing the right answer. So let's begin by reading out this passage, How Technology is Destroying Jobs. MIT business scholars, just going to skip the names, have argued that impressive advances in computer technology, from improved industrial robotics to automated translation services, are largely behind the sluggish employment growth of the last 10 to 15 years. Even more ominous for workers, they foresee dismal prospects for many types of jobs as these powerful new technologies are increasingly adopted not only in manufacturing, clerical, and retail work, but in professions such as law, financial services, education, and medicine. That robots, automation, and software can replace people might seem obvious to anyone who's worked in automotive manufacturing or as a travel agent. But their claim is more troubling and controversial. They believe that rapid technological change has been destroying jobs faster than it has been creating them, contributing to the stagnation of median income and the growth of inequality in the United States. And they suspect something similar is happening in other technologically advanced countries. As evidence, they point to a chart that only an economist could love. In economics, productivity, the amount of economic value created for a given unit of input, such as an hour of labor, is a crucial indicator of growth and wealth creation. It is a measure of progress. On the chart, he likes to show separate lines represent productivity and total employment in the United States. For years after World War II, the two lines closely tracked with each other, with increases in jobs corresponding to increases in productivity. The pattern is clear. As businesses generated more value from their workers, the country as a whole became richer, which fueled more economic activity and created even more jobs. Then, beginning in 2000, the lines diverge. Productivity continues to rise robustly, but employment suddenly wilts. By 2011, a significant gap appears between the two lines, showing economic growth with no parallel increase in job creation. They call it the Great Decoupling. And he says he is confident that technology is behind both the healthy growth in productivity and the weak growth in jobs. It's a startling assertion because it threatens the faith that many economists place in technological progress. They still believe that technology boosts productivity and makes societies wealthier, but they think that it can also have a dark side. Technological progress is eliminating the need for many types of jobs and leaving the typical worker worse off than before. He points to a second chart indicating that median income is failing to rise even as the gross domestic product soars. It's the great paradox of our era, he says. Productivity is at record levels, innovation has never been faster, and yet, at the same time, we have a falling median income and we have fewer jobs. People are falling behind because technology is advancing so fast and our skills and organizations aren't keeping up. While technological changes can be painful for workers whose skills no longer match the needs of employers, Lawrence Katz, a Harvard economist, says that no historical pattern shows these shifts leading to a net decrease in jobs over an extended period. Katz has done extensive research on how technological advances have affected jobs over the last few centuries, describing, for example, how highly skilled artisans in the mid-19th century were displaced by lower skilled workers in factories. While it can take decades for workers to acquire the expertise needed for new employment, he says, we never have run out of jobs. There's no long-term trend of eliminating work for people. Over the long term, employment rates are fairly stable. People have always been able to create new jobs. People come up with new things to do. Still, Katz doesn't dismiss the notion that there's something different about today's digital technologies, something that could affect an even broader range of work. The question, he says, is whether economic history will serve as a useful guide. Will the job disruptions caused by technology be temporary as the workforce adapts, or will we see a science fiction scenario in which automated processes and robots with superhuman skills take over a broad swath of human tasks? Though Katz expects the historical pattern to hold, it is genuinely a question, he says. If technology disrupts enough, who knows what will happen? All right, so the next thing we've got is two little figures here. So we've got here productivity is the full shaded line. It's going up. And then we've got employment, which is the dashed line, which is going up. So it's basically showing that productivity is going up and with it, employment is going up. But it looks like as you get to say around 2000-ish, it starts to level off a bit. So the gap between productivity and employment is sort of increasing. Figure 2, output per person, employed person manufacturers as factories have become more automated. So what this shows is that the United States, Germany, and Japan, they all have pretty low output per worker. But as the years go on, I guess output per employed person has become more automated. So automation is just taking a larger role. So let's just go to these questions and see if we can answer them. The main purpose of the passage is to, well, I think that just by reading it, it was pretty clear, especially if you read this a little slower. Technology is destroying jobs. And I know the end part had that Harvard economist who was saying, you shouldn't just assume the worst. But even it ended talking about why this could be a major change, and it's kind of uncertain. So if we look here, examine the role of technology in workers' lives during the last century. Well, that could definitely be it. But let's just go on. B, advocate for better technology to enhance workplace conditions. Definitely not. I don't think you can look in the passage and see much at all about like why we need better technology. It's more talking about the effect of technology. Argue for changes in how technology is deployed at the workplace. Well, that is possible, but not likely because it doesn't seem like they're talking about that. And then assess the impact of advancements in technology on overall job growth. So just looking at these questions, B and C don't seem to be in the passage because the passage we just talked about is basically talking about the impact of automation and technology on jobs. And I mean, even the title says technology is killing jobs. So I think D, assess the impact of advancements in technology on overall job growth, is much more direct and clear than A, which was the other possibility, examine the role of technology in workers' lives. So I would choose D for that one, and we can check that at the end. So just write that down here. We've got D for the first one. Let's go to the second question, number 12. According to the authors, can't pronounce those names, advancements in technology since approximately the year 2000 have resulted in, well, we actually just talked about that, which shows that, okay, advancements in technology since approximately the year 2000. Let's look at here. Oh, here. Then beginning in 2000, the lines diverge. Productivity continues to rise robustly, but employment suddenly wilts. So that was in line 36, 38. So 38 through 40. So it says that advancements in technology, basically the productivity and employment have diverged. So that could be low job growth in the United States. Well, if you look at B, global workplace changes, it didn't talk at all about that. Like, it's just not there. Whenever you're doing these, I think the best thing is just what's the most obvious, what's the most clear and direct and specific, because this isn't creative. This is just what is objectively in the passage. So there's not really too much room for interpretation. So question C, more skilled laborers in the United States. Well, it didn't really say that either. What it said in here, as businesses generated more value from their worker, the countries, blah, blah, created more jobs, but then beginning in 2000, the lines diverged. So 35. So basically that would be low job growth. So B is not it, C is not it. D, no global creation of new jobs. Well, if you're not seeing no global creation, you're just seeing like less creation relative to productivity. So I think A would be good for that. I'll just write that down here. And then 13, what choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Well, what we got is question A, low job growth in the United States since the year 2000. And also this fits in with the first question here, where he basically said that technology is killing jobs. So especially technology's skyrocketed since 2000, and we've had low job growth in the United States is probably a fair answer. So for evidence of that, we didn't use the passage too much for that. So we should probably just go quickly one by one, just give each of these possibilities and see which one fits the best. So lines 1 through 6. So it does say here that technology here is largely behind the sluggish employment growth. So that sounds pretty close to what we thought, but not completely sure. So let's look at lines 13 to 15, which basically say here that robots, automation software, blah, blah, might be obvious to anyone who's worked in automotive manufacturing or as a travel agent. Well, that's just saying that certain industries that have seen technology very closely have seen that it has a big effect. But that doesn't really generalize into what we're looking at, which is low job growth. So that definitely isn't it. Let's go to C 21 to 23. Well, here you've got, and they suspect something similar is happening in other technologically advanced countries. That doesn't seem like an actual good, like the best evidence. Like the lines right before that did have something to do with that, but not as clearly as like lines 1 through 6. So let's finish this part looking at question D, 35 to 38. As businesses generated more value from their workers, the country as a whole became richer, which fueled more economic activity and created even more jobs. Well, that's going against the thing, which seems kind of confusing. But then you look a little bit before, right before that part, it says for years after World War II. So we're talking about a historic time period, and literally right after the quoted sentence, it says then, beginning in 2000, the lines diverged. So employment suddenly wilts. So that shows D is definitely not it, because that's kind of making a different point about earlier job growth. And we're talking about since 2000, not before 2000. So let's go to 14. What is the primary purpose of lines 26 through 28? So here, starting with the amount. The amount of value given, the amount of value created for a given unit of input, such as the hour of labor. Well, that doesn't make much sense on its own, but if you look at the little bit of context, you've got in economics, productivity, the amount of. So it looks like they're just giving a definition because they say in economics, productivity, and then they've got this dash, the amount of blah, blah. So they're basically explaining what it is, and they're like, it's a crucial measure of growth. So from that, we can see it's basically just explaining a term, which is the simplest way to see that. So give that D there. As used in line 35, what does clear mean? So let's go to line 35. 35. The pattern is clear. As businesses generated more value from their workers, the country as a whole became richer. The pattern is clear. So what are our possibilities? Like the pattern is pure. The pattern is pure. That just does not make much sense. Like if you're talking about like clear water, pure water, I don't think the pattern, you wouldn't really hear the phrase, the pattern is pure. Let's look at this. The pattern is keen, like clever. The pattern is clever. That does not really make any sense. The pattern is untroubled. That also doesn't really make much sense because what we're talking about is the clarity of a pattern. That the pattern is obvious or the pattern is just easy to see. And then they sort of go on to explain what pattern is so obvious. So option D, unmistakable. That makes perfect sense. The pattern is unmistakable. That just fits with the context. Okay, which of the following best characterizes Cat's attitude towards today's technologies, digital technologies? 81 to 82. So what does Cat say directly in 81 to 82? Let's just start with 80. Still, Katz doesn't dismiss the notion that there is something different about today's digital technologies, something that could affect an even broader range of work. So what he's saying is he's alarmed about countries increasing reliance on them. No, it literally didn't say that. Also, it's probably, especially since they're talking directly about 81 to 82. No, he is unconcerned. Definitely not, because it said there's something different about it. So I don't think he's just unconcerned. He's uncertain how they might affect job growth. That sounds right, because it's literally saying here, still, he doesn't dismiss the notion that there's something different. So he doesn't have a very clear answer, but he's still saying there's something different. He's not exactly sure. So I think that uncertain would be a good word to describe it. He's optimistic that they will spur job creation to a degree since not seen since the mid 19th century. Well, it definitely doesn't say that either. So I think the best answer for that would be C. He is uncertain. So let's go on to the next question. Okay, so this is just one of those evidence questions. What's a good choice that shows evidence that he is uncertain? So 68 to 72, what does that say about him being uncertain? 60. He's done extensive research on how technological advances have affected jobs, blah, blah. For example, how artisans in the mid 19th century were displaced by lower skilled workers in factories. Well, that doesn't really have to do with what he thinks about the future. He's sort of describing something in the past. 73 to 75. Well, here we have, while it can take decades for workers to acquire the expertise needed for new types of employment, he says, we have never run out of jobs. Well, that's a very confident sort of statement, and it doesn't really have to do with what he thinks about today's digital technologies. So I don't think that would work. 79, what does that say? People come up with things to do, new things to do. Well, again, that doesn't really have to do with his uncertainty, which was pretty clear in the passage. So we're just left with D, which is 91 to 92. Let's see what that says. 91 to 92. Though Katz expects the historical pattern to hold, it is genuinely a question, he says. If technology disrupts enough, who knows what will happen? Well, that sounds a lot like who knows sounds a lot similar to the other thing. Where was it? Sorry. It sounds quite similar to when he was talking about, like, he's not sure. So I think that D is the clearest, that sort of echoes his uncertainty that was pretty established in that last question. So let's go to line 83 to figure out what range means. Okay, so let's just read the whole sentence to get good context. Still, Katz doesn't dismiss the notion that there is something different about today's digital technologies, something that could affect an even broader range of work. So he's talking about like a type, like when he says range of work, let's see what a region of work. Well, broader region of work. That sounds like, in one way you could say that, but it just does not sound right, because when you're talking about a broader range of work, you're talking about like more types of work, and a broader region of work just doesn't sort of fit. Broader scope, that definitely sounds right, because a scope you have to do with like that. Just if you just plug this word in, it's kind of pretty clear. Like broader distance of work, well, you wouldn't talk about like broader distance. And then broader position of work, well, I mean, it's possible it would be that, but I think that when you just look at that, like A and C don't make too much sense at all. But if you look at B and D, broader scope of work, I mean, you've probably heard that before, like broader scope of work or broader scope of something. So I think B is the best guess, and I'm pretty sure about it, but I think it's a good guess. So now we're looking at the figure 1. So according to figure 1, which of the following years shows the widest gap between percentage of productivity and employment? So we don't even have to look at the choices. So we're looking at this widest gap. Well, it's all pretty tightly connected here. Starts to diverge around this area. But where's it the biggest? Well, to me, it's pretty much right here, which is in between 2007 and 2013. So I would say somewhere around 2010. Okay, so the possible choices close to that, 2007 and 2013. Well, let's look back there. 2007, that's not. 2013 is definitely it. Because 2007, if you just look at that, like that's about from 400 to 500 here. But 2013, that's like from like 380 to 540. So that's definitely bigger. So the answer would be 2013. And also, if you just think about the text, it makes a lot of sense for it to be 2013, because, well, we've been talking this whole time about how this new technology has been affecting work. So which statement is supported by figure 2? So let's just figure out what figure 2 is about again. Basically, it's saying that output per worker, so like the amount of productivity that occurs per one worker, has increased every year since 1960. So let's just test out all these things. So the country with the greatest growth in output per manufacturing worker from 1960 to 1990 was Germany. So what we're looking at is 1960 to 1990. So which one experienced the greatest one? Well, that would be, if we look at Germany, that's about like 25 to 50, 25 to 60. But then here we've got in the US like 25 to 50. So I think that Germany would definitely be more than the United States. But if you look at Japan, on the other hand, we've got it at like, I don't know what that is exactly, say 10 or 15 or something. And then we end up around 75. So I think Japan is actually, so that first choice is probably not wrong. Right. So A is definitely not there. So we can just sort of mentally cross that one out. Let's go to B. Japan experienced its smallest increase in output per manufacturing worker from 2000 to 2011. Smallest increase in output. So 2000 to 2011. Smallest increase. So increase just means like the change between one decade to the next. So we're looking at Japan. I forgot. Japan 2000 to 2011. So 2000 to 2011. Japan is this one. Well, if you look at that, it's 100 to about 140 for Japan, which is about 40 different. But then if you look at the United States, we've got about 100 to, well, maybe like 99 to 125. So that's even smaller. So B would also be wrong. C. Each of these three countries experienced an increase in its output per manufacturing worker from 1960 to 2011. Each of the three countries experienced an increase in its output per manufacturing worker from 1960 to 2011. Well, that sounds right, but let's just look. So, yes, it's definitely true because all of these are under 50, and now they're all over 100. So that's got to be true. But just let's make sure that we're on the right track by testing out this option D. Of the three countries, the United States had the greatest output per manufacturing worker for each of the years shown. So this shows that the US is like the highest on every time. Well, right away we can see it's not because Germany was higher in 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000. So it's only in 2011 that it became the highest, beating out Germany and Japan. So that would not be true. So that we can conclude that option C, saying that all of them just did increase in general from 1960 to 2011, is correct. So which additional information, if presented in figure 2, would be most useful in explaining the statement in lines 57 to 60? So let's see what it says in 57 to 60. 57 to 60. Productivity is at record levels. Innovation has never been faster, and yet at the same time, we have a falling median income and we have fewer jobs. So that basically what it's saying there is that productivity is going really high, but jobs aren't falling. So what's a good figure or piece of information to illustrate that? Well, median income of employees. Well, we're not even talking about income. We're just talking about raw, like number of jobs, number of people employed in factories. That could be a good metric because we're looking at like how productivity has increased from this time period, like 1960 to 2011, but jobs have not, especially in manufacturing. So number of people employed since then could be useful. Type of organizations at which output of employed person was measured. Probably not, because we're just talking about the raw number of jobs versus raw productivity. C, the types of organizations at which output was measured. Well, we're not talking about type. If we just go back to that 57 to 60, what we're talking about is simply productivity is super high and jobs and median income are falling. Oh, that's interesting. So it does talk about the falling median income. But then again, like, I think the main point, if you look at the whole passage, is not income, but it's more about jobs. Because well, the title, How Technology is Destroying Jobs. So even though it does talk about median income a little bit, I don't think that's like the closest to what we're looking at. So I think I would choose B. Oh yeah, I just have to look at D. The kinds of manufacturing tasks most frequently taken over by machines. Of course, that would be important and interesting, but that just doesn't have too much to do with what raw job numbers we've got versus productivity. So I would go with B for that one. All right, so hope this helped. This was a little bit long and pretty rough, but hopefully it was helpful. Please let me know what you thought, and I will definitely be doing the rest of the reading and writing passages in the future. So please stay up to date on that. Thanks for watching.